Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks and forests all over North America. Of those hundreds, every year, there's always a few that go missing under very strange circumstances. And one man, whose name is David Paulides, who's a former police detective, has made it his mission to investigate these strange disappearances. We're talking about people that are in plain sight of other people, that suddenly, in an instant, go missing, and there's absolutely no trace of them. It's like they've just vanished off the earth. In other cases, it's people that have gone missing and then are found in locations that are seemingly impossible to get to. And so these cases are explored under David Paulides' Missing 411. He's written numerous books, created documentaries around it. And so today I'm going to focus on 3 of these Missing 411 cases that, in my opinion, are especially bizarre and worth a closer examination. If the Missing 411 phenomenon is something you want to look into more closely, I would obviously tell you to go check out David Paulides and his team. I have all their links in the description. But you can also just go to one of my playlists. It's just called Missing 411, and I put any episode that I do about Missing 411 in that playlist. And so far, this is the 4th. And if you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do on this channel. And I upload 3 to 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would encourage you to gently mule kick the like button and then subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of those awesome weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 1999, Jaryd Atadero was staying in the Comanche wilderness in northern Colorado with his 2 kids. He had his daughter, who was 6 years old, her name was Jocelyn, and his son, Jaryd, who was 3 at the time. They were staying at the Poudre River Resort, which Alan actually owned. He co-owned it with his identical twin brother, and Alan was up there to prepare the resort for winter. Alan had recently divorced from his wife and joined a Christian singles group, and somehow it came up that some people in the singles group asked if they could stay at the Poudre River Resort with Alan and help him prepare the resort for winter in exchange for free lodging so they could have a little vacation. Alan said that was great because he really needed the help. As soon as they got up there, 11 of the Christian singles members were talking about going to the nearby state fish hatchery. Jaryd and Jocelyn had heard about this and were really eager to go with them, and they asked their father, Alan, if that would be okay. Alan felt comfortable with Jocelyn, his 6-year-old, going, but was reluctant to send Jaryd because he was 3, was worried that, he would lag behind, and was just generally reluctant to send his youngest. But Jaryd really wanted to go, and Jaryd was saying, well, you let Jocelyn go, I want to go. Alan, maybe against his better judgment, said, yep, you can take Jaryd. Jaryd hated wearing shoes. Jaryd said, can I leave my shoes? And Alan said, no, you got to bring your shoes. And Jaryd really put up a fight. He didn't want to wear his shoes. Alan said, okay, put on your shoes, we just won't tie them. That's the compromise they made. Put on his shoes, didn't tie them, and he was off. So the Christian singles group of 11 plus Jocelyn and Jaryd take off towards the state fish hatchery. But without asking for Alan's consent, instead of going to the state fish hatchery, they decided to head over to the Big South Trail, which was about 15 miles west of the resort where Alan was. They get to the beginning of this trail, which is an 11-mile, very rugged trail. Narrow path, it's fairly steep. You're going up almost 10,000 feet of elevation. This was a rugged hike. This was not a beginner's hike. Now, we don't know exactly what the timeline is here, but we know that Jaryd and Jocelyn were definitely with the Christian singles group when they began this hike. Because at some point, the Christian singles broke into like a fast group and a slow group. And during that time, when they kind of separated into 2 groups, Jaryd had somehow run ahead of one of the groups and had come in contact with these 2 fishermen that were on the Big South Trail. The Big South Trail was located near a world-class fly fishing area, and these 2 men were fly fishing. And they saw Jaryd, and they also saw these 2 groups of people making this climb on this trail, and they, the fishermen, assumed that he had to be with them. Jaryd walked up to them and said, hey, have you seen any bears in the area? And they said, no. And Jaryd just skipped away. It's believed that the 2 fishermen that saw Jaryd on the trail were the last 2 people to see Jaryd alive. At some point shortly after Jaryd has made contact with these 2 fishermen, The singles group realizes they've lost track of Jaryd. They have Jocelyn, but they've lost sight of Jaryd. And so there's an immediate search of the area. They're yelling out to Jaryd. And after about an hour, they haven't found him. However, one of the Christian singles members hears a scream. It was not a scream of someone getting attacked, but rather it was way off, off the trail. It sounded like a child who they would describe the scream as sounding gleeful, like they were playing with someone, like they were playing tag or hide and seek with someone. They tried to make it over to that area, but they couldn't locate where the sound was coming from. And despite yelling out for Jaryd constantly, they could never locate him. While this search is going on, one of the members leaves and goes back to the resort to break the news to Alan, Jaryd's father. Alan immediately gets in his car. He's yelling, "You lost my baby." And he drives over to the Big South Trail. Now, Alan just assumed he'd be able to get out and just charge around like a maniac, yelling for his son, and he would find him. But he quickly realizes that this is a really rugged and very dense area. It's going to be almost impossible for he alone to search and find his son. He calls authorities, and authorities show up, and they launch this massive search. Now, the search and rescue crew, when they showed up, they were very confident that they were going to find Jaryd. They felt like they had a really good sense of where he was, that it would have been very difficult for him to go anywhere. They had the fishermen saying they had seen him. They had one of the members who heard a scream in a specific area. They've done these searches, unfortunately, many times, and most times they find the child hiding somewhere, crying somewhere, but they're unhurt. By the next day, after a full 24 hours of searching, when they haven't found anything, that's when the search and rescue team began to realize that more than likely this was not going to be a successful search. Now, the search would go on for a week. It was a very chaotic search. The case had made national headlines, and so people were converging on this area in Colorado just to kind of be a witness to this case. You had volunteers showing up left and right to help search, and police had to actually keep them from going into the area because they didn't want to clutter up the search area. So it's just very chaotic. And also during this time, a helicopter crashed that was searching for Jaryd. Luckily, no one perished in that crash, but it was just this crazy search for about a week, and they don't find anything. A week after the search had begun, they officially called it off, and the going theory was that Jaryd had most likely been attacked by a mountain lion. 4 years go by, and 2 hikers were in the same area on the Big South Trail, walking up the trail, and they decide when they got to this one section near where Jaryd went missing, there was this really steep rocky climb that was not part of the trail. But if you wanted to, and you were adventurous and athletic enough, it's feasible that you could crawl up, hands and knees all the way up this rocky face, and you could get to this rocky outcropping where you'd have this great view looking down over the canyon. And so these 2 hikers decide to do that. So they start climbing up this rocky slope that they would say is a treacherous climb. And actually, David Paulides, the man behind the Missing 411 project, does a video where he climbs up that rocky face, and it looks very steep and difficult to navigate. So these 2 hikers make it to this outcropping, and the first thing they notice is a pair of brand new children's sneakers, white sneakers. And as soon as they see it, they think, "Oh, I guess a family must be up here," and they let their kid take their shoes off. And so they're looking around for the family that must have just been adventurous and climbed up here, but there's no one up there, and it's a small area, and they're like, "Huh, what are these shoes doing up here?" Then they found bits of Jaryd's clothing near the shoes. His pants were found turned inside out, completely turned inside out. His sweatshirt was more or less intact. Both the sweatshirt and the pants had all the signs of being out in the open for 4 years with, weather hitting hard and being exposed to the elements. They were frayed and tattered. The shoes had also apparently been out in the elements for 4 years, but showed almost no wear and tear. The hikers that found them literally thought they were brand new shoes. And then around that area, they also located one of Jaryd's teeth, and they found a bone that belonged to Jaryd as well. So it really begs the question, how did Jaryd get up nearly 550 feet above the trail over extremely difficult to navigate terrain? And why were his shoes completely unweathered after 4 years of being out in the elements? And why were his shoes up there in the first place? They were untied on his feet. He certainly would not have been able to navigate the terrain up there even with his shoes laced. But if he had been navigating that terrain, he almost certainly would have lost his shoes in the process. So we don't know what actually led to Jaryd's demise. However, we do know that somehow he was found, his remains were found in an area that was effectively inaccessible to him. In July of 1938, the Beilhartz family decided to go camping deep in the Rocky Mountains. Now, the Beilhartz family was a huge family. They had 10 kids, including Alfred, who was a 4-year-old boy. One of the days they were camping, they decided to go on a hike to a great fishing spot. And so they got in this big line with all 10 kids and the parents, and they start walking, and Alfred was far back in that line. And at some point, he must have wandered off or got separated, and at some point, the family noticed. There was an immediate preliminary search. There's a bunch of them. They're calling out to their son, their brother. After this initial search results in nothing, one of the members of the family alerts authorities, and it would launch a 10-day search. When the authorities showed up, they were operating under the assumption that Alfred must have fallen into the river and drowned. And so their efforts went into not only damming the river to stop anything going through, but they also began raking the river as well to find any of Alfred's remains. When the raking of the river and the damming of the river turned up nothing, the authorities decided to bring in some bloodhounds from a nearby state penitentiary to try to pick up his scent and find him. And so they bring the bloodhounds over to where he went missing, and right away they pick up his scent. And then, somewhat paradoxically, instead of going down to the river where all the authorities assume that's where he must have gone, the dogs turned and went up this near sheer cliff. They went over 500 feet uphill to this clearing on the mountain, this little plateau on the mountain, and then they just laid down as if they had found him. The authorities assumed this was an anomaly. There's no way this child could have gotten up nearly 500 feet to that plateau, not to mention there was no sign of the child up there anyways. So they just assumed that the dogs must be wrong. So they sent those dogs back and got new bloodhounds to do the same test. And so they brought the new bloodhounds to the point where Alfred had vanished, and they did the same thing. They didn't go down to the river. They followed the exact same trail all the way up, nearly 500 feet up to that plateau where they laid down to signify this is where the scent ends. And it was baffling because there was nothing up there to indicate that he was there or ever was there. But now you have two groups of bloodhounds that did the same thing. You can't say his scent wasn't up there because the dogs found it twice. So at the same time this search is going on, a report came in from another hiker that was about 6 miles away, less than 24 hours after he had gone missing. And the report from this hiker was he was sitting down to take a rest, and he looked up towards this mountain. And about 500 feet up, he saw a little rocky outcropping, and a boy walked out to the edge and looked down at him. And the man looked up like, how did the boy get up there? And the child let out a shrill shrieking sound before something that was out of view pulled him backwards, and then he was never seen again. And so he reported it, and the authorities dismissed it, because how could a 4-year-old boy have moved 6 miles away and 500 feet up to this rocky outcropping? However, authorities did send a team to go search that area where this hiker had seen this child, and there was nothing there. So you have these two separate locations, one near where Alfred disappeared about 500 feet up on a seemingly inaccessible rocky outcropping where the bloodhounds had taken his scent to, and then it vanished. And then 6 miles away, you have another sighting of a boy that matches Alfred's description that's another 500 feet up on a rocky outcropping that's seemingly inaccessible to a child. And that's all we have. Alfred was never found. In August of 1897, two parents and their 6-year-old daughter named Lillian went berry picking in Maine. The section of Maine they were in was only 15 miles away from the Canadian border, and it was very, very densely forested. At some point, the parents noticed that Lillian wasn't with them anymore. They assumed she must have wandered a couple feet away. Maybe she was behind a tree. But after an hour of searching, where they can't believe they're not seeing any trace of their daughter. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere where if you yell out, someone's going to hear you, but there was no response from their daughter. They can't find her anywhere, so they alert authorities. Hundreds and hundreds of people came out for this search. The family is distraught. They're offering these huge rewards for any information about their daughter. You have all these very experienced outdoorsmen and huntsmen that are going out and looking for this girl. There is nothing. She has vanished completely. During this whole ordeal, friends and family would stay out in the woods overnight. They would just stay out there yelling and calling for Lillian, and she never turned up. About 48 hours after Lillian disappeared, there was a group of people searching an area about 2 to 3 miles away from where Lillian had gone missing. And Lillian just walks out from behind a tree, perfectly calm, doesn't look harmed, and she's just asking for her mother. There's this amazing reunion. It's a miracle that she's been found. I mean, this is 2 days that she's been missing in the middle of rural northern Maine. I mean, anything could have happened to her, but she's here, she's alive. When they asked the girl, what happened? Where'd you go? Why did you walk away? Like, what happened? She said something that piqued David Paulides' interest, and this is why this became a part of the Missing 411 project. She said, the sun shined all the time in the woods. The problem with that is while she was missing, it was overcast, dark, dreary, and she was in a very dense forest where there was, even if it really had been a very sunny day, you're not getting much sunlight coming down to the forest floor. So why would she describe something as being sunny the whole time in the woods when in reality, there was almost no sunlight? She also claimed that over the 2 days she was missing, she heard people talking around where she was, but she said that she needed to stay quiet because of the tramps that would be upset if she made any sound. It's just a very strange story, and like every other missing 411 case, there really isn't a good, rational explanation for why it happened. While David Paulides does not come out and say explicitly what he believes is behind all these strange occurrences inside of these missing persons cases, the insinuation or implication of his research is that something paranormal is behind it. So I'd like to hear what you think is behind some of these strange disappearances. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, I would encourage you to gently mule kick the like button and subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly 3 to 4, even 5 video uploads on content that sounds an awful lot like what you just listened to in today's video. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My handle is johnballin416. Also, I'm very active on TikTok, where my handle is Mr. Ballin. So whether I see you on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of the above, I just really appreciate your support. Until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon.